And you know what,
Perfect.
folks? You can't protect what you can't see. And most teams are only hearing part of the performance. Now, today's networks are more like a symphony, data moving in harmony across cloud, the edge, remote sites, and much of it is encrypted. But if you're only listening to the violins, you'll miss the drums, the bass, and ultimately the warning signs. So in this session, we're going to show you how Plixer One brings the full score into view so you can catch every note before things go off key. So today we're welcoming you to observability beyond the core, data collection from your full estate, no matter how hybrid it is. And I am thrilled to turn it over. Oop, there goes my mic as I whack it on the intro. Turn it over to Adam Beckman. He's our manager of solutions engineering, and he'll be taking you through the session. In the meantime, there's a Q&A, raise hand, and chat down the bottom that I'll be monitoring if any of you have questions or comments along the way. So take it away, Adam.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Nice orchestra reference. That fits. I like it. I'll try to be as eloquent as Peter, but I'll probably fail miserably at that. For those that I haven't met, again, my name's Adam. Been with Plixer for a long time. Prior to Plixer, all aspects of IT, from boots on the ground to support to you name it, I've probably done it. So in my journeys, I've had a lot of back and forth with customers around getting visibility, observability, anything into their network, right, to help them address their needs better. And so I got the opportunity here to kind of put together my experience in terms of what I see. And as I started thinking about that, everyone I talk to, they're on a different part of this journey, right? Of like from initial deployment, small use cases up to like full enterprise level, much value, consolidated tool sets. And so my effort today is to kind of condense this down to like a 10 steps or 10 points, if you will, on what that journey looks like. And for the most part, it is going to be in order. Obviously, nothing's ever exact. There are, circumstances that can change this. For the most part, this is how I've seen it over the last 15, 20 years of where people are at in this journey. So let's talk about first, kind of real quickly, before we dive into like the 10 lists, let's talk about why observability matters, right? A lot of folks I talk to, they have some level of visibility, at least into their network. Typically, it's almost always north-south. That's where most people start. However, when it comes down to troubleshooting a lot of things, or even the security side, looking at things that are happening on the network, there's a lot of stuff that happens east-west, and that's often overlooked. And so today, as we look, as over time, networks are getting more complex. Right? They're changing. You have not just on-prem data centers or remote branch locations, but you have very large distributed networks. Oftentimes, there's cloud workloads now. There's virtual environments. So you have this multi-environments network that you have to manage and maintain. And getting insight into the traffic across the entire network can be challenging, right? Sometimes there's multiple tool sets involved, sometimes there's multiple teams involved, and that can make it very hard. Combine that with the fact that networks continually change, right? You acquire, you expand, you get bought out, right? Things change all the time. And so without the proper planning and the proper tool set in place, things can have a lot of issues, right? Over this, from delayed detection to performance issues, security breaches, overall increased risk of those types of things happening. So this is why when we look at observability, why it's really important, because having it lets you detect things very quickly and avoid extended downtimes, catch them before they even happen, and rectify it before it becomes an issue. And on the security side, catch breaches very quickly and stop them before they have a chance to really have a significant impact on your organization. So I'm going to start with just a couple examples. I'll start on the security side, and then we'll dive primarily. Most of the day is going to be network focused, but and I thought I'd pick some examples of things that you may not have heard of. Everyone's heard of the big things that have happened in the world. Whether it's SolarWinds breach or back in the early 2000s, Stuxnet, all that. We were familiar with the big ones. So I thought I'd kind of find some that you may or may not have heard of before. So 2023 in May, the Danish energy organization, they had a breach. And all said and done, right? I won't get into the specifics of how it happened. When it was all said and done, the main takeaway was that once the the aggressor got in, there was very little tooling available for the Danish Energy Organization to catch and stop or quarantine the threats. And so what the main takeaway after this was, hey, you really need to improve your observability in your infrastructure so that if something does happen, you're able to find it, detect it, and stop it. They were pretty much at the mercy of this once this attack was underway, and they had to let it play out before they could really get a grasp on what happened. So again, example of why observability is very important. Now, we look at network. If you guys are familiar with some of the CDNs in the world, StackPath, fairly big one. They, a while back, were acquiring other CDNs and expanding, doing very well, but they didn't plan their growth appropriately in terms of tooling or efficiencies. And so they ended up having to spend massive amounts of time troubleshooting stuff, really slowed their growth, cost them lots and lots of money and of just downtime and whatnot. They underwent this journey, right? They adapted an observability platform, and at the end of the day, once they had it in place, they found that their troubleshooting was significantly faster, and the revenue they saved on downtime prevention was in the millions of dollars annually. So it is a big deal, right? The bigger you are, the bigger deal it is. But observability is something that we should have on the forefront of our minds in terms of making sure our organization is equipped to prevent significant downtime, whether it's a network issue or security issue. So let's get into the checklist, right? Again, starting with this kind of mirrors the customer journey as I've seen it over the years. And so for most folks that I have chatted with or had the pleasure to meet, they typically start with your data center, your headquarters, your corporate network, or your main campus, or whatever your vertical, whatever is equivalent for you. And it typically consists of your north-south. Typically, sometimes will consist of hopefully at least the core switch, and that's where we start. Right? Is at a when you start this journey, the first thing you want to plan is let's make sure we get visibility into traffic moving through our main locations. When you think of how does this translate to infrastructure, typically this is going to be not always the case, right? But for most customers, this is going to be your firewall, your core, and maybe you go down to the distribution level if you need to, right? But you look at the main campus, main areas. Oftentimes this does include a little bit of WAN. Sometimes this can be hybridized. There may be a little bit of cloud in this, especially for companies that have gone serverless or in that transition of migrating key workloads to the cloud that may expand a little bit. And this actually leads us to the second item, right? So if you look at moving beyond just your main areas here, this is the site that a lot of times gets overlooked, especially if you miss this step, then anything else you do is going to be limited in terms of what value you get out of it. I am continually surprised, and I can probably speak for a lot of my colleagues here, when I engage with a customer and I'm educating them on the latest and greatest, they're very surprised to know, oh, you can get visibility into the cloud. And nowadays, that is like table stakes for observability. There's so many workloads that are moved to the cloud. It's really a part of most organizations' infrastructure now. Having the ability to see traffic in your cloud environments in the same tooling that you have to see on-prem traffic or your virtual environment traffic goes a very long way. Right? Having it all in one view where you can correlate everything together significantly increases and speeds up your ability to react to things. We go beyond this though, and we look at also remote sites. So whether, again, this is vertical specific, whether it's clinics, if you're in like a hospital system, could be banking centers or retail locations, depending, again, depending on vertical, right? Anything you have that's remote is going to have where people access or people reside or you have workloads that exist. You want to have some level of understanding of what traffic is moving in and out of those locations. What makes this oftentimes a challenge, and this is where I think a lot of time there's a breakdown, is depending on that environment, it may not be straightforward of configure NetFlow, configure IPFix, SFlow, JFlow. It may not be a traditional flow type export. So, and I'll use cloud here as an example because cloud uses what's called flow logs, right? Whether it's AWS, Azure, Oracle, Google, they all follow a similar path where they provide some type of cloud flow log that instead of being sent to a NetFlow collector, is typically fetched, right? And it's typically like a JSON or some other type of XML format, not your traditional flow format. So a lot of tools have to actively develop and plan ways to ingest that. So as you look at your observability platforms and you look on the market, you look at what you have today, a couple things you want to keep in mind, right? There's a lot of ways that vendors will support this type of export. Some will use agents, right? I'm not a big fan of agents. They have their place, but where you can get away with not using an agent, it's usually a win because agents, I don't give you guys the agent speech, right? The complexities, issues you may have with compatibility, upkeep, maintenance on those, right? If you can get away with like an API call or some type of, like I said, fetch mechanic, the better, right? Because then again, it's less maintenance, less overhead, less things you have to worry about from a complexity standpoint. So keep that in mind, right? Checklist number 2, cloud workloads, external remote sites, oftentimes you need something other than traditional NetFlow. Move to 3. Now, this is the step that is sometimes skipped, and it can be okay, but this is where, and sometimes this is planned up front, which is great. But if you think about why you need or want an observability platform, right? There's a lot of reasons, but one of those reasons is if you have an outage, if you have some type of issue that causes some downtime, you need or want access to this tool to be able to see and address and figure out and rectify and remediate this issue. You can't do that if the outage also removes the access to the tool. So when you plan out your telemetry that's feeding your observability platform, you want to take into account that scenario, right? If we're going to have an outage in a data center and my tool only exists in that data center, you may be out of luck unless you have a console and you can call Jim down at the data center to connect in and look at it, and then maybe you have a solution. But for the most part, you want to make sure that both your telemetry is some type of high availability, your access to the tool is some type of a high availability mode, and you kind of plan this accordingly. One kind of pro tip that I could give that I've seen over the years, right? There's solutions out there. We have one, but there's solutions out there that will kind of separate your export for your traditional NetFlow IPFix style exports from the destination. So you're not beheld to configurations on all your routers, for example. Those tools can go a long way in both streamlining the management of the telemetry as well as setting you up for some type of high availability, right? Where you can feed these into like an HA pair of replicators, for example, and then feed them off to different redundant collectors. So there's ways you can plan using those types of tools, but those tools also bring, by decoupling, that brings a lot of other efficiencies that you can realize outside of just high availability. Things like having a single point of configuration for UDP streams, whether it's syslog, NetFlow. So when you add a new tool, you don't have to reconfigure all your exporters. You can go to one place and configure it, especially for syslog, right? Think about how many servers or services you have that send syslog information to some type of receiver. If you add one, it's just a matter of updating a line in a single location rather than hitting all your exporters. So again, a lot of value there as well. All right, so as we move beyond number 3, we kind of move away from what I would classify as kind of the collection, right? So 1, 2, and 3 are really about ensuring you have the appropriate collection, the appropriate telemetry in place, that you're feeding information as best as you can. We now move into kind of what I would classify as kind of that value range. This is where you start to now extract value out of the observability tool. So the first thing I want to talk about here is integration with key vendors. I'm sure if we inventoried everybody on the call, I would bet money that we're going to have at least 5 or 6 different vendors that you have in your infrastructure. Cisco's probably number 1. I hear Palo Alto a lot, so I have them on this list here. There's others, Fortinet, your cloud environments, AWS, Azure, all the ones I mentioned before. Again, a large number of these. A lot of these exports go well beyond the 5 tuple. Cisco usually is license dependent. They probably have one of the largest selections of other information available in their exports. Palo Alto, I think it's included. So if you have Palo Alto firewalls, you probably have the ability to inject into your flow records things like user information. In other words, what users behind each traffic that you're seeing, application level, layer 7 application identification, NAT reports if you're doing natting at the firewall. These are things that are not standard NetFlow information elements. So there's a lot of tools out there that just say, you know what, we're supporting the standard 5 tuple or even 7 tuple piece, just so we can standardize across all exports. But what you really want to make sure is that you have a platform that goes beyond that, right? Take advantage of the infrastructure you own. The information available, we use Cisco here as an example, right? They have ABC or NBAR, which has a lot of performance metrics in it. Things like latency, jitter, QoS metrics. These are things that are invaluable a lot of times when you want to troubleshoot why someone's having a bad user experience. If your vendor infrastructure can send that, but your tool can't read it, it's not going to do any good. So you really ensure that you're taking advantage of what you have. Again, this extends into the cloud. This is a really long list, hence why I have the 3 dots at the bottom here. We can talk more about this later, but this is a big one that I see a lot of people miss. So keep in mind, if you do have Cisco, Palo Alto, Fortinet, or some of these other ones, and you're only getting 5 tuple information, maybe there's a configuration that you can change within your firewall or switch to give you more information, or we'll happily help you with that if that's the case, right? If you're using Scrutinizer, call up support and they can help give you suggested configurations to take advantage of these fields. All right, moving to number 5. Similar, but different here, right? So now we look at like correlation, right? This is where, there's some tools out there that will kind of just display raw flow records. Yeah, can think of like as searching through a firewall, a log, right? You kind of grep or use some type of keyword search. Hey, here's an IP, show me all the records that didn't match this IP. And while it can be useful, it's not optimal by a long shot. You really want a platform that's going to stitch these flow records together to give you kind of a before, during, and after timeline type view, so you can map traffic throughout your network at different times with different hosts and different applications. On top of that, a lot of times, you want to go well beyond the IP address when you look at troubleshooting or investigating some type of issue. And so having a tool that not only can correlate and stitch flow records together into more visual things that are easy to ingest, also correlating that with user information, correlating that with device information, location of a device, what type of device was it? That stuff that can save you a significant amount of time in troubleshooting and getting to that remediation because it gives you context. And context, quite frankly, is what's going to help you get things solved quicker, right? I mean, at the end of the day, more context you have, the better decision you can make. And so having a tool that not only stitches these together, but gives you this context is really, when it comes to observability, is what separates the visibility from observability. It's part of the step, is having that context. Number 6, halfway there. So number 6, we talk about, and this is kind of probably the main one I have in here from a security standpoint, and we'll kind of back to NetOps here. But it'd be a crime not to call this out, right? Observability benefits a lot of different teams, not just network teams. It benefits, SecOps. It benefits cloud ops. There's a lot of teams that this can benefit. When it comes to detecting lateral movement and rogue applications, this is something that you really want to analyze your traffic for. Again, the example earlier, lateral movement is something that, from a security perspective, is almost always present in every single security incident in the world. So having a good east-west detection in place, the tool is not just going to show you the data when you ask for it, but going to look at it and analyze it for lateral movement, find rogue applications. It's something that you definitely want to take advantage of. And becomes less reactive, more proactive. So as we talk about kind of that proactive step, right, let's move to number 7 here. When you are looking at analyzing the traffic, whether it is reactive or proactive, being able to kind of correlate this down to the department, the user, or the group, this opens a whole new world, right? No longer is this observability platform just a troubleshooting or just an investigation tool. Now it's got real business impact, right? Now you can really affect and inform your business around all sorts of information. And this, again, adds a lot more value to the platform and makes you a more valuable asset to your organization if you're able to provide this type of information and observability. And this again spreads across tagging everything from user groups, subnets, interfaces, cost allocation, etc. You can all sort it as it makes sense for your organization. All right, number 8. So this is where we really start to look at moving proactively. And this is a lot of conversations I have with customers revolve around this point here. If you think about troubleshooting, right? Let's say that you're on the network team and someone calls in or opens a ticket or something saying, hey, I'm having this type of issue. So it bubbles up to you, and you then have to log in and go look at, run reports, look at the traffic, investigate. Are you able to validate that issue within the platform? And if so, then do root cause analysis, figure out what caused the issue, and then recommended steps to fix it so it doesn't happen again. When we start looking at traffic patterns, we really want us to be more proactive. Think about before someone calls in to say there's an issue, what if an alarm or alert gets generated and says, hey, this issue is detected. Now you can log in and look at it before the ticket comes in. Less downtime for the user, shorter, bad experience. Get to be the hero rather than the villain sometimes. And so being proactive can really increase the amount of, or decrease the amount of downtime an organization will have or a user will have, which all comes back to revenue and stuff like that, right? You can always map it back. And so, but this step to be proactive is a big step, and a lot of organizations, they get here and they stop, right? But this really is the step that's going to start adding a lot of value. And we're able to help with this as well should you need assistance. All right, number 9. So at this point, we're assuming you have the visibility from everywhere, you have monitoring in place, you have anomaly detection in place. A well-running observability platform has so much value that it can provide that a lot of times tools like SNMP or other tools have a lot less value and oftentimes are replaced. You find that your observability tool is the one you're going to is your first stop. Also keep in mind that by combining cloud log visibility into data center visibility into remote site, security team and NetOps team working together, they're all using the same tool, right? A lot of times these other teams have their own tools that do very similar things. And so by having a unified tool, this is really going to help you consolidate those costs. Again, just and add more value to the organization as a whole. All right, number 10. So if you think about scale, this is really the last piece, right? So there have been a number of customers that I've met with over the years, been part of this journey from start to finish. A lot of them have started small, data center, core router, etc., that have grown into an enterprise level solution leveraged by multiple teams. And so at some point during that, this comes up. It can come up at different points. I saved till the last year, but it can come up at different points. And so when you're looking at observability tools, you really want to make sure that you have one that is scalable. And that can mean a lot of things, but at the end of the day, you want to make sure that it's distributed environment, that it can either have scalable from like a resource standpoint to get more flow rate. It can do high availability, that it's lightweight. In other words, less client-based, more server side. And so this is like the last piece, right? If you can plan this appropriately, then as your organization grows, the ease at which you scale this observability, it just makes a world of difference. I mean, think back to the example I gave you about StackPath. They didn't have this in place. They didn't have a solution that scaled. And so they struggled with it as they acquired new organizations. They struggled to scale their tooling, and that caused them a lot of issues. And so this is something to consider. So I want to give a quick example. We talked about the examples earlier. This is not a real life example, but the individual points in here are, right? So these are things that I have seen a number of times. But this is I just kind of want to frame what this will look like with like multiple teams using this, right? So think about like a remote site, remote branch, remote location, experiences some type of issue, right? Ticket gets raised, NetOps gets called. you dive into it and you find that, hey, there was congestion on this link because of a backup job. Now, the backup job thing, I've seen that a number of times. This is something that is a fairly common occurrence in my field when I talk to customers that are having issues. Not always, but this is a very common occurrence. And so you find that, hey, a misconfigured backup job is running during the wrong times. So, hey, you're able to fix that, right? But your observability platform was able to find that for you. At the same time, you have a different team, right? The security team gets an alert about unusual traffic going to some type of foreign IP address. Again, they use the same tool, right? But they investigate this IP, what host we're talking to it, and they find it's coming from a rogue IT device because, again, we're correlating device information with network traffic flows. And they're able to identify the device, where it's at, what it did, and they're able to rectify it very quickly. Again, this can go, you can solve this very quickly with the right tooling. And the best part is you don't need packet capture. Now, packet capture has a place. I don't want to say it's not necessary. A lot of times that can be a good data center central point for ingesting. NetFlow really has its place, especially when you look at like distributed environments, because you can't packet capture everywhere. Either way, right? This can all be done without packet capture if you want it to be. Now let's talk about kind of the spectrum, right? This is kind of a fun exercise to do together. I just assigned 4 levels, and I kind of broke it at where I very commonly see customers at. A lot of customers I see are, small site data. In this case, I say data center only, but it could be whatever translates for your vertical. Then the next step really is making sure you have your cloud sites, remote sites, cloud environments. And then after that, then it starts the value prop, right? We're like, okay, are we correlating our flows correctly? Are we understanding and ingesting and making sense of the enriched metadata available in our vendors' environments? And are we leveraging some type of threat detection, right? Security teams are taking advantage of the tool, right? That's kind of the level 3. Once you have that all in place, right, you verify that, hey, yeah, we're getting Cisco NBAR data. Our Palo Altos are sending user and app layer 7 app ID information. We have usernames being correlated, and we're also have some threat detection turned on that's being looked at or sent to a SIM or something. Then the next step is really the final piece, right? Making sure that you have this across all environments, that you have multiple teams using it. They're all have their workflows saved and they're trained up and know how to use the platform across all their domains. Right? That's kind of the ultimate level. So, the question is, where do you fall today if you had to place yourself here? And again, kind of a fun exercise. So last slide, then we can take some questions. So where do we go from here, right? So we're here to help. We do have this checklist available in PDF. So I think we're planning to send it out as part of the follow-up to this webinar. So you should watch for an email that'll have a downloadable PDF. We're also, we can do one-on-one assessments. If you want to talk to one of our customer success reps, they can look at your current environment and determine kind of, where are you in this journey and what can we do or what can you do to improve this. Or, if you want to see a demo around things like the anomaly detection, security side, if you don't know what cloud flow logs look like, but you're curious, you want to see before you implement it on your own solution, give myself or my team a call and we're able to kind of set that up for you and walk you through it. With that, I will turn it over to any questions.
I didn't see any in the system. Fantastic job, though. And as Adam mentioned, yeah, we'll include the PDF of the 10-point observability checklist that'll come in the follow-up email sending you out, where you can catch this again for replay. I did also want to make you aware, coming up Monday, August 19th, 8 a.m. Pacific, we have Tech Talk talking about smarter performance monitoring for complex application environments. We actually have a field guide that goes through a number of various use cases, and we're going to start displaying that or talking about it, showing you how you can put together, all of these various use cases to create an amazing observability and defense system within your infrastructure. That was pretty good. Did you have fun, Adam?
I did. Always take the opportunity, right? This is what I love to do. So
excellent. All right, folks, if there are no questions, we really want to thank you again for joining us for this webinar. For my good pal, Adam, I'm Peter, and we're with Plixer. Thanks for watching.